身のオリジナル RPG バテンカイトス
During the 6th console generation, a lot of attention on JRPGs seemed to go towards the PlayStation 2 mainly, considering many popular JRPG franchises from the previous console generation migrated over there, such as Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Suikoden, and Wild Arms for example. This should come as no surprise really. With that said, that's not to say there weren't some other quality JRPGs coming out for other consoles at the time. And when I say other consoles, I really just mean GameCube, as Xbox and JRPGs. I mean, you got Sudeki at least. That'll hold you over for about a week.
What the...
The GameCube on the other hand though, while it didn't necessarily have a lot of offerings in that department either, what it did have was quite excellent. Early in the console's lifespan, we got some classics such as Skies of Arcadia Legends, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and Tales of Symphonia, some of my all-time favorites really. It was already a huge step up from what we got on the Nintendo 64, as the only redeeming JRPGs there were Paper Mario and Ogre Battle 64, which if you haven't played that one yet, you really should. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, little do we know that a brand new IP in the JRPG genre was about to come out for the GameCube in late 2004. Well, it was previewed in magazines and stuff, I guess, and it did come out in Japan the previous year, so technically we did know. But what I guess I should say instead is that we were really looking forward to it. Of course, the game in which I am referring to is Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean. First of all, I'm of the opinion that believes it really doesn't matter how you choose to pronounce a fictional, made-up set of words, but in case anyone tries to at me that I'm mispronouncing the name, I did a little research before the video, and this seems to be the most official pronunciation that we have. This can be heard in some Japanese commercials,
Baten Kaitos,
and even in an old English promotional soundbite before the game came out that doesn't even exist anymore and was dug up by the YouTuber JRPG in a great video.
Welcome to Baten Kaitos.
You the real MVP. It sort of sounds like Baten Kaitos a little bit too, depending on how you hear it, so I don't know. Baten Kaitos, whatever. Both of those are probably correct in their own way and the most official out there. Not that it even really matters like I initially said, so anyway, moving on. Baten Kaitos Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean was co-developed by both Monolith Soft and Tricrescendo. Yes, the same Monolith Soft that would go on to create the amazing Xenoblade series. In addition to this, there were some absolutely iconic names in the JRPG industry working on the game as well. A couple of these names would include Motoi Sakuraba and Masato Kato, and please forgive my white American suburban pronunciation of that. Kato is an absolute legend, best known for his work in writing the script for Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, and Xenogears, and Sakuraba is an amazing composer, most famous for his work on the Tales of series, Star Ocean, Golden Sun, Dark Souls, and many more. When you have people of that caliber writing the story and composing the music, you know you're in for a damn good time. Nearly 17 years after its initial North American release, I've been really curious to go back and play it recently and see how it holds up in modern times. It's one I played a lot as a kid and got pretty far on numerous occasions, but for whatever reason, I just never actually beat it. I've been really determined to do what I never finished as a kid though, and there's no better time than the present. So, with all that exposition out of the way, let's dive into the meat of this video and take a deeper look at Baten Kaitos Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean. The story of Baten Kaitos begins in a sort of fourth wall breaking scenario with the protagonist of the game, Callus, addressing you the player as his guardian spirit. There's a story reason behind this, as guardian spirits are essentially souls from other worlds that can intertwine with select individuals, offering them great knowledge and power. Right off the bat, we already have a pretty unique premise here, as most other JRPGs usually have you playing as the main character himself or herself, whereas in Baten Kaitos, I mean yes, you do control the main character, but you and the universe are actually a completely different person, or soul, or entity, whatever. This isn't just a little one-off gimmick never to be brought up again either. On numerous occasions throughout the game, Callus will ask for his guardian spirits, aka your opinion on various matters, and other characters will acknowledge your existence as well. It's pretty cool. Off of the top of my head, I'm not sure if it's the only JRPG that has a concept like this, but it's gotta be one of the few at least. Anyway, back to the actual story. After choosing your name and gender, some flashbacks occur of Callus's life, of which you're supposed to have no idea of the actual context behind them yet. Shortly after, Callus awakens in the peaceful, farming village of Sebelrai, and this is where the journey truly begins. After a short conversation with the village's doctor, we discover that Callus was attacked by some rock cats, whatever those are, before he was carried back to the village. We also find out that he used to live with his grandfather before he died a couple years ago. Other than that, we don't really know a lot about him at this point. This mystery is only deepened as not too much later, you meet the heroine of the game, Shella, and before Callus can finish answering her what he's doing around these parts, he gets cut off. They go their separate ways at that time, but they do meet up again a little bit later at a nearby forest when Callus saves her from being attacked by a monster. Before I just replayed this, I had honestly sort of forgotten how Callus's personality was, so some of the lines around this part really caught me by surprise with their absolute savagery. Like, listen to this. 2 of Shella's traveling companions just died, and this is what Callus has to say.
Hey, you're stealing their things? They're my friends, you know.
They were your friends?
I was like, oh shit, this dude's a dick. I mean, that was hilarious, but what an asshole. Don't worry, I'm not spoiling anything either. This all happens within the first hour of the game, and these 2 characters have no relation to the story whatsoever. But yeah, Callus may not necessarily be the most likable, however, it is a refreshing change of pace to play a JRPG where the main hero is more of moral ambiguity as opposed to being a righteous do-gooder, which is often the case. Anyway, to give a TLDR version of what happens next, Callus and Shella fight another boss, release what is called an In Magnus, shortly after, get ambushed by the Empire and a dude named Giacomo, who also happens to be the person that killed Callus's grandfather. Said Empire in person proceed to kidnap Shella. Callus then goes on to rescue Shella, and together they start their journey of releasing the rest of the In Magnus from the other 4 island nations, for reasons that would be considered spoilers if I were to reveal them now. I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll touch on it some more a little bit later when I give my opinion on how they handled some events. It's an enjoyable and unique enough story though. It does start off pretty generic, and the way some stuff plays out later could have been executed better in my opinion, but the ideas and the lore behind the world itself are really interesting, I think. The whole concept of floating islands and oceans and whales and shit is pretty cool. I don't know, I like it. On the topic of the uniqueness of the world, I want to take this moment to appreciate just how absolutely beautiful and gorgeous the overall aesthetic of Baten Kaitos really is. I love how each island has its own distinct culture and look to it. It really gives it a lot of life and makes the world seem a lot more fleshed out. And when I say distinct, I really mean distinct. I mean, we have an island entirely made of clouds, a jungle-type island with the huge rainbow always above it, and then there's Mira, the City of Illusions, which you can probably guess by the name, has tons of really unique and interesting environments. I mean, just in Mira alone, there's a confectionery village made entirely of sweets and desserts, and a picture book town with a really wacky and different visual style. The locations are all just so diverse and charming. I really love how imaginative and creative they are. The variety just makes them super memorable, and some of them are sure to stick with you over the years. One little gripe though is that I do wish the towns were just a little bit bigger, as they're usually not much more than a couple screens, but given how rich with detail they are, I can see why they opted for a smaller scale here. I mean, just look at the way the trees move in the background in Sebelrai. It's beautiful. Even when you go inside houses, there's just no wasted space and so much detail everywhere. It really makes them feel lived in. There's also a lot of flavor text when examining various objects. I always love when games do stuff like this, as it adds a lot of life and charm to the world, I think. Aesthetically, an obvious comparison to make is to the PS1 Squaresoft RPG Chrono Cross. As previously mentioned, given the main scenario writer was also the director of Chrono Cross, it's pretty easy to see where the inspiration may have come from. Honestly, the whole graphical presentation of the game, with the 3D character models and pre-rendered backgrounds, really feels like the natural evolution of a lot of PS1 JRPGs. If you're a fan of the look and aesthetic of PS1 Final Fantasy games, then you're sure to love the visuals of Baten Kaitos and will feel right at home. In my opinion, the impressive visuals along with the music are probably the most notable aspects about the game. And that makes a nice segue to talk about the music itself. Motoi Sakuraba really outdid himself here and delivers one of his best works, from what I've heard at least. It's a very enchanting and elegant and relaxing OST. The towns are super calm and peaceful. the battle music is really catchy, and overall, he just nails it. One minor nitpick is that I do wish there was some more variety in the tracks later in the game, as some of the songs in town started to repeat themselves a bit, but the music is excellent all the same, so I really can't complain. Out of all the JRPGs on the GameCube, this is probably my personal favorite OST out of that bunch. Now, another strength of the game that I'm sure many of you are wondering why I haven't already brought up considering it's a huge component is the battle system. To put it in simple terms, the combat in Baten Kaitos uses a turn-based system built around cards. Now I know there's some of you out there that hear the term cards and turn into Casper, and usually I do as well, as I'm not really a fan of card-based battle systems, but the one in Baten Kaitos is different and a lot of fun, I think. In the world of Baten Kaitos, cards are called Magnus, and you can acquire these in a variety of ways. You can buy them in shops, find them in chests, get them as rewards in battles, and so on. Magnus can also come in a variety of forms as well. There's Attack Magnus, Defense Magnus, Healing Magnus, and yeah, you get the idea. Each character has their own deck that they then build with these Magnus. Healing Magnus and stuff like that can be equipped by anyone, but Attack and Defense Magnus have to be equipped by that specific character only. Or couple characters, or few characters, or whatever. What I'm trying to say is not everyone can equip everything. You're only allowed to include a certain amount of Magnus in your deck, so this requires a lot of strategy in choosing how you want to build them and approach battles. Do you want a more offense-heavy deck, putting yourself at more risk for damage? Or do you want a more balanced deck? Or do you want to make a character more of a dedicated healer and give them a lot of the healing Magnus? There's definitely a lot of strategy in how you want to go about things. The amounts of Magnus you can equip in decks does increase as you level up and the game progresses forward though. When it's a character's turn in battle, they have to commit to the action of either choosing to attack or defend, or choosing to heal. You can't switch back and forth between both, during that turn at least. The amount of Magnus you can use per turn does start off pretty small, but it also increases as the game goes on as well. Over time, you'll come across some really strong and powerful Magnus to further build your deck around, giving you even more strategy to work with. Elements also play a huge factor in battles. There are 6 total elements, 2 of which oppose each other and will cancel each other out if you use them in the same turn. For example, if you're attacking, you do not want to use both Fire and Water Magnus as they will negate each other and do shit damage. I've seen a lot of people recommend not to use Magnus of opposing elements in decks to avoid this scenario, but I don't know. Each character has really powerful Magnus of each element, so I feel like I'm just sort of limiting myself and cutting myself off from some cool cards by doing so. Personally, I kinda like the extra difficulty and quick thinking that it added to work around it. And yes, there is a timer on each turn, so you can't just lollygag around trying to think of the perfect strategy before acting. You gotta act quick. A little annoying at times, as it did wreck me on some occasions, but it keeps you engaged at least. There's also some more complex mechanics, making use of the numbers on the Magnus and stringing together typical card hands to create combos and bonus damage. There's even some entirely new attacks that can be formed by chaining together the right Magnus. To be honest, I never really consciously thought about this or tried for it though, as there's already a lot to consider in the limited time that you do have. They usually just ended up triggering by accident, which was always a nice surprise. Like, oh, dope. Outside of a couple difficulty spikes, the game's not really hard enough for you to worry about it either, so I just thought, screw it. Overall, I just really love the battles in Baten Kaitos and all the strategy that they require. Given that it is built around a card deck, there is an element of luck that does come into play, so that can be a little infuriating at times if you happen to get hands of all defense when it's your turn to attack, but it also adds some extra excitement and plays into your favor sometimes as well, so it's a double-edged sword. Probably my biggest gripe with the battle system though is that they're pretty slow by nature, as you can only target one enemy at a time. Honestly, I was really looking forward to each encounter in the first half of the game, but the second half, battles started to get a little repetitive just due to how long some of them took. Granted, the enemies are visible on the maps, so you can skip most of them pretty easily if you want, but you also need to battle a lot of them if you want good Magnus and just to level up in general. Still though, battle length aside, they're a lot of fun at least. Alright, I've rambled a lot about the good stuff in Baten Kaitos, but it's not a perfect game and does fall short in some areas. For one, don't hate me, but I don't know, I just don't think the characters are that good. I really like the fantasy design on some of them, like Callus Mizuti and even King Laticon for NPCs, but the way they're written, could have been better. They start out really generic, and I will say they get much more developed in the second half of the game as you learn more of their backstory and whatnot, but even still, I just felt like they never really lived up to the potential I would have liked. I mean, I guess Callus is kinda different considering he's sort of a jerk, but Liud is your basic, soft-spoken Empire guy caught on the wrong side that eventually switches. Gibari is just Wakka from Final Fantasy X minus all the prejudice remarks, and yeah, I could keep going. They're not terrible by any means, but as someone who's been playing JRPGs their entire life, I've just seen better written characters in the genre. I do really love the expressive character portraits though, as there's a lot for a variety of scenarios, and they add some good life and emotion to the dialogue. Speaking of the characters, I do also need to address the elephant in the room. There is voice acting in this game, and yes, it is absolutely horrendous. Not only are a lot of the lines delivered pretty poorly for the most part, but the quality of the audio itself is just really muddy and not good. It's just not a very crisp and clear sound and doesn't sit well with the background music. Like, there were a couple scenes where I could barely hear the characters even speak just because the audio quality was so poor compared to the background sound and it just got drowned out.
I won't kill you though. There's a few things I need to ask you.
Some of the voices themselves are okay, and they're not all that bad, but they're not all that great either. All the playable characters and some of the more important NPCs sound generally okay for the most part, but some of the side characters on the other hand, I don't even know what they were thinking or why they even bothered to record audio in the first place for them. Like, some of the fortune tellers and all of the kid voices are just really, really bad. Like, laughably bad. Like, the sound engineer just had his own kid come in and record some lines.
That's Leo's sailboat, if you're wondering. Brand new Imperial model. Pretty cool, ain't it?
Yeah, so there's that. I mean, you can turn the voices off, I guess, but I just feel like I'm missing some of the game by doing that, as you can't hear their voices in battles either. I just really don't know why they had to record audio for some of these characters in the first place. Like, was anyone gonna complain that Pololo III or random kid from the beginning of a town who you never talk to again wasn't voiced? I don't know. I really don't think so. Their thought process kinda just eludes me there, to be honest, but hey, at least the music itself is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I want to end this video by giving my opinion on how some major plot events played out later in the game. As it goes without saying, huge spoilers will obviously be included. Like, seriously, this is one of the biggest plot twists in any JRPG ever. Don't watch this part if you haven't played it yet. Instead, skip to the timestamps below. You have been warned. Alright, for those that have played the game, I'm sure you already know the event in which I am referring to. At about the halfway point in the game, or even a little bit past it, you find out that Callus, the person who you've been controlling, has actually been working for the other side the entire time and completely turns against the party. You, the player, as his guardian spirit, then get kicked out of his body and have to bond with Shella instead and play as her for a period of time. He's not necessarily an evil person per se. Instead, he's just someone who's hell-bent on revenge and will go to any means necessary in order to act upon it. In hindsight, there are some definite signs that show Callus to be a pretty sketchy person of moral ambiguity, but for the most part, the game does a pretty good job at hiding it. Some people might have predicted the twist, but I don't know. I would argue not many. While I really like how unique the concept behind this idea is, I just wasn't a huge fan of how they handled events afterwards. I feel like people are just forgiven too easily. Like, Shella still acts in love with Callus even though he just harbored the power of an ancient evil god and tried to kill everyone. I guess he does come to his senses later and sort of redeem himself, but I don't know. Melodia is probably even worse. Like, the whole second half of the game, she's the main human antagonist and is a total psychopathic bitch trying to take over and destroy the entire world. After you foil her plan and defeat the evil god Malpercio, everyone just seems to sorta forgive her. I mean, Duke Calbrin, her grandfather, is just all like, yeah, she's got a lot of thinking to do. I don't know. I just think they could have handled the way some events played out a little bit better. Aside from that, the ending itself is really great and pretty emotional. All the characters saying goodbye to you, the player, is a pretty unique touch that only works with this type of concept. Overall, minus some minor flaws here and there, Baten Kaitos is a wonderful JRPG that any fan of the genre should definitely play. I'd say its strengths definitely lie in the gorgeous visuals and beautiful aesthetic, the top-notch soundtrack, and the really fun, engaging battle system. You probably won't get really attached to the characters, as there are certainly better games in that regard, but you will find yourself immersed in a super vibrant, lush, fantasy world rich with visual treats and eye candy to feast on everywhere. If nothing else, Baten Kaitos is certainly worth experiencing for that alone, and you have the oh-so-amazing music to really help set the mood. If this is one JRPG that has escaped you until now, then you should definitely find a way to check it out. It's become a cult classic over the years for good reason. It stands the test of time extremely well, and shows that not only are its wings eternal, but so is its legacy among JRPG fans.
Man, you corny!
God, that was corny. Yeah, let's just end it there. And that about wraps up this retrospective over Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean. You know, I really loved this game as a kid and have a lot of fond memories of it, so I'm just really happy that I finally got around to beating it. Better late than never, right? The wait was well worth it in my opinion though, as now that I'm older, I was able to appreciate some things a little bit more than when I was younger, I think. On that note, I never actually got around to beating the sequel in the series either, or prequel I should say. So, if you're interested in seeing a retrospective over that one, let us know with a comment below. I also need to give a special shout out to our first 2 Patreon supporters. It truly means a lot to have you here with us in the beginning. There's only bigger and better things to come. For those wishing to join them in further supporting the channel, links to our Patreon and other social media can be found below. Depending on which tier you join, you do get the ability to vote in polls determining which games we will cover in our future retrospectives as well. Just something to keep in mind. Other than that, thanks a bunch for watching our video everyone, and have an awesome day. This is Gaming Productions. Until next time.